Bienvenido a Sombras del crepúsculo. Cuando la luz se desvanece y la penumbra toma el control, las sombras se alargan, cobrando vida propia y revelando historias escalofriantes que permanecen ocultas durante el día. Aquí, en la delgada línea entre la luz y la oscuridad, cada relato trae consigo horrores que estremecen el alma, enigmas irresolubles y terrores capaces de paralizar incluso a los más valientes. La noche te abraza, seductora pero mortal, y no permitirá que abandones este lugar sin antes enfrentar tus peores pesadillas. A modest escape, nothing more was the plan. These woods were a mere fringe, a whisper of wilderness barely buffering the sprawl. Honestly, driveways and rooftops hemmed it in like a poorly fitted collar, and sometimes carried on the right breeze, the hum of traffic bled through the trees. Yet that proximity was its charm, close enough for comfort, distant enough for the illusion of solitude. The initial day unfolded without incident. My shelter, a simple nylon dome, rose near a clearing that offered a fractured view of the nascent stars. Quietude settled, profound and welcome. Over embers I charred sausages, letting the dusk deepen into true night. The air thrummed with the usual suspects, the rasping chorus of crickets, the distant query of an owl. Standard woodland ambiance. When the dark felt complete, I retreated into the tent, cocooned myself in down, and surrendered to sleep. It began with a shriek. Not human, surely. That was the immediate, desperate rationalization. It was too thin, a needle of sound, impossibly high, piercing the stillness with surgical violence. I was bolt upright before conscious thought caught up, heart hammering a frantic tattoo against my ribs, the pulse echoing in my ears. Frozen, straining, I listened into the void. A fox, perhaps. Some nocturnal bird in distress. But silence reclaimed the woods. No echo, no repeat. For long minutes I sat rigid in the blackness, breath held captive in my chest, fingers clamped onto the sleeping bag's fabric. Eventually a fragile logic asserted itself. Wild things make wild sounds. I eased back down, commanding muscles to unclench, seeking the lost shores of sleep. Then came the tread. Unhurried, purposeful, crunching through the leaf litter just beyond the thin tent walls. My breath hitched, every nerve ending fired. A deer, surely, or a portly raccoon, maybe an exceptionally bold squirrel. It had to be, but the sound persisted, drawing nearer, beginning a slow circumnavigation of my temporary home. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Dry leaves, brittle twigs, the distinct snap of a heavier branch underfoot. A weight that spoke of something beyond common woodland fauna. My hand, betraying me with a sudden tremor, fumbled for the torch. Twice the button slipped beneath my thumb before a cone of white light sprang forth. Unzipping the tent fly just a crack, I thrust my arm out, the beam slicing into the layered darkness between the trees. Dancing shadows, nothing substantial. But the footsteps ceased. The ensuing silence pressed in, heavier than the noise had been. Hello? The word emerged as a dry croak. I cleared my throat, tried again, forcing volume. Hey, whoever you are, cut it out. The quaver in my voice shamed me. Stillness answered, only the sigh of wind stirring the canopy. Get a grip, I told myself. Imagination runs riot in the dark. Campfires and shadows breed phantoms. I knew this. I retracted my arm, zipped the tent tight and remained seated, the torch clutched like a talisman, waiting for I knew not what. When the sound resumed, it wasn't walking. It was running. A frantic pounding flight through the undergrowth, branches cracking. Instantly, the torch flared again as I tore the zipper down. The beam snagged motion, a shape flitting between trunks. Large, impossibly large. It moved upright, yet its locomotion, its sheer velocity felt utterly wrong, alien to man or beast. I gaped, mind scrambling to process the fleeting image, but it vanished into the deeper woods before comprehension could solidify. The forest fell silent once more, save for the ragged gasps tearing from my own lungs. Panic, I knew, was a useless indulgence. 2 paths lay open. Hunker down until dawn, or flee. Staying felt like an invitation. Whatever I'd glimpsed, whatever stalked these woods, didn't feel inclined to simply wander off. Boots were wrestled onto feet, jacket zipped with clumsy haste. The torch went into a pocket. My trembling fingers closed around phone keys and the small sheath knife I always carried. Scant protection, but better than bare hands. The objective was stark. Reach the car, parked perhaps half a mile distant just beyond the trailhead. Safety lay beyond the tree line. I repeated it like a mantra. The path, familiar yet treacherous in the dark, snaked ahead. I kept the torch beam low, focused on the uneven ground. Every few strides I paused, listening. The woods felt altered, unnaturally still, as if holding a collective breath. No crickets chirped, no owls called. A vacuum of sound. Then the scream ripped through the quiet again. Nearer this time. Chillingly, it seemed to originate from the direction of my vehicle. A knot of ice formed in my gut. My grip tightened on the knife's handle as I pushed onward, pace quickening. Stealth be damned. Escape was paramount. The footsteps returned, flanking me now, moving parallel through the dense trees, unseen but undeniably present, pacing me. No longer running, just accompanying. I spun, sweeping the torchlight into the tangled darkness. For a heartbeat I saw them, twin points of light reflecting the beam, low, like an animal's. Then extinguished. The accompanying tread halted once more. "Leave me alone." The shout felt pitifully small, swallowed by the vast woods. Silence was the only reply. Turning back to the trail, I broke into a run. Roots became snares, stones treacherous obstacles. Twice I nearly pitched forward, recovering with flailing arms. My lungs burned, my legs were leaden weights. But the car wasn't far. Through the trees, a faint metallic glint promised refuge. Then I heard it, directly behind me, gaining. I refused to look back. A primal certainty told me that to look was to falter, to be lost. I ran, fueled by pure terror, every muscle fiber shrieking protest. The torch beam bounced erratically, painting wild strokes of light on bark and earth. I burst from the trees onto the graveled parking area like something ejected. The car stood sentinel, a dark shape under the starless sky. Keys slick with sweat were fumbled from my pocket. The remote chirped, lights flashed. I covered the last few yards in a desperate sprint, wrenched the door open, and hurled myself inside, slamming it shut. The lock clicked down. Chest heaving, I sat gripping the steering wheel, staring wildly back at the impenetrable wall of trees. Nothing stirred. The woods were placid again. Then a thunderous impact struck the car's flank. A raw, involuntary scream tore from my throat. It hit again, a blow that rocked the vehicle violently, threatening to overturn it. Through the passenger window, I saw its outline pressed close. Towering, immense, textured like ancient bark or matted hide. The details refused to coalesce. My mind recoiled. Key jammed into the ignition, twisted. The engine roared. Foot slammed onto the accelerator. Tires screamed on gravel as the car lunged forward, fishtailing onto the narrow access road. Speed limits, potholes, irrelevant. Distance was the only imperative. The rearview mirror reflected absolute black. It wasn't pursuing. Or perhaps it was, cloaked in the night. I didn't slow until my own driveway lights bathed the car in their weak, familiar glow. For a long while I remained there, staring at the stranger reflected in the mirror. Pale face, haunted eyes, hair plastered to my skull. My hands still shook uncontrollably. Eventually, robotic limbs carried me inside, bolts sliding home, locks clicking on every door, every window. Sleep was an impossibility. Closing my eyes brought only replays, the fleeting shape, the reflected eyes, that unearthly shriek. I swore never to return. No more campsites, no more woods, not ever. But a cold certainty settled deep within. This wasn't an ending, merely a pause. Whatever resided in that fringe of wilderness, it wasn't just an animal. It wasn't just passing through. It had watched, it had followed, and it was still out there. The memory remains crystalline, the first time the stillness shattered. Somewhere near 3 in the morning's deepest hour, a sound pulled me from sleep. A low resonant thrum originating from my bedroom wardrobe. Disorientation clung to me, perhaps a phantom echo from a dream. I pushed myself upright, knuckles grinding sleep from my eyes, and waited. Pitch darkness reigned, yet the wardrobe silhouette stood defined against it, door firmly shut. I held my breath, straining, my gaze fixed. The sound persisted. A dull, abrasive friction, reminiscent of corroded metal hinges, yet nothing visibly stirred. Minutes stretched thin, marked only by my pulse, until a subtle vibration registered. The wardrobe door, though closed, quivered almost imperceptibly, as if something substantial pressed against it from within. Bare feet met the frigid floorboards, sending a jolt racing up my spine. I moved with deliberate slowness towards the wardrobe, each step measured. My palm flattened against the wood. It felt cool, smooth, yet undeniably alive with a faint internal tremor. I tested the handle. It turned, but the door resisted. Applying more pressure, I twisted again. A soft groan of yielding wood, and it swung inward halfway. What struck me wasn't precisely an odor, but the stark sensation of cold invading my nostrils, tightening the skin across my face. I peered into the shadowed recess. Empty hangers dangled like skeletal fingers. A couple of jackets usually resided there, but I'd removed them days prior. Nothing untoward met my eyes. Just the bare metal rail, the cluster of hangers shoved aside. Yet the cold was profound. It coiled around my face, my arms raising goose flesh. More than mere chill, it possessed movement. A faint, deliberate current like the gentlest exhalation. Carefully, I pushed the door shut and retreated to bed. Sleep remained elusive. I listened intently through the remaining darkness, but the sound did not return. The following night, I resolved to dismiss it. Sleep claimed me near midnight, the apartment steeped in silence. I'd ensured the wardrobe door was securely latched, even wedging a chair beneath the handle, unnerved by the memory of its autonomous shudder. Hours passed. Then abruptly I was awake. The sound had returned. That low guttural moan, the creak of stressed timber, now overlaid with something akin to a whisper, dry and sibilant. My eyes snapped open. The chair stood untouched. The door remained closed, yet the disturbance continued, unabated. Shoving the chair aside, I pulled the door open once more. This time, I lingered. I reached inside, sliding the hangers along the rail, their plastic clatter sharp in the quiet. Again, the palpable cold, and now, an undeniable drift of air. I felt it brush my knuckles, my wrist flowing over my arm like a slow, ethereal leak. I inclined my head, pushing deeper into the wardrobe's void. No vents were visible. The back panel appeared solid, ordinary. I rapped it with my knuckles, firm wood beneath. My fingers swept behind the hangers, nothing but empty space. The frame was intact, the upper shelf bare, all outwardly normal. Yet standing perfectly still, I perceived the soft susurrus, the whispering. It wasn't any language I recognized. The syllables were indistinct, muffled, rushed. I recoiled, pulling the door closed, a knot tightening deep in my stomach. A film of sweat prickled under my arms. I fought for composure, but my heart hammered against my ribs. A trip to the bathroom, cold water splashed on my face, then back to bed, leaving the wardrobe sealed. I lay awake, staring into the darkness until dawn painted the window gray. Over the ensuing nights, the phenomenon intensified. Each time awakening near the same dead hour, I'd find the wardrobe door vibrating, the wood groaning, the composite sound scraping at my nerves. Opening it always revealed the same scene. Barren interior, clustered hangers. Yet the breeze never failed, cold and languid against my skin. The whispering gradually gained definition, though not comprehension. Distinct syllables emerged, rough-edged, as if uttered through a parched throat. There were no discernible pauses, just a continuous hushed monologue that made my scalp crawl. I found myself instinctively stepping back after opening it, hesitant to turn away, plagued by an irrational fear that something might emerge if unobserved. Sleep became a fragmented, anxious affair. Every night brought the same internal debate. Surely it wouldn't happen. Surely it was a draft, faulty plumbing, followed by the inevitable recurrence. After a week, I barricaded the door with heavy cardboard boxes, wrestling an old defunct television stand to wedge against it. That night, the sounds permeated the barrier, muffled but present. I remained in bed, rigid, breath held captive, muscles clenching and unclenching involuntarily. Come morning, I dismantled my fortress. Inside the wardrobe, nothing had altered, still vacant, still cold to the touch. The daytime air held no trace of the anomalous current. Frustration began to eclipse fear after several more nights of this siege. I remember pacing the confines of my room, waiting. As the familiar vibration began, the gentle shuddering of the wardrobe door, I watched from my bed, jaw clenched. Enough. I would confront it. Flipping on the overhead light, I strode across the room, seized the handle and wrenched the door wide. The cold billowed out, a tangible wave striking my face, making my eyes water. The whispering was markedly louder now. I tried speaking into the void, a desperate experiment. Hello? My voice sounded thin. Is anyone there? Silence answered, save for the ceaseless sibilant murmuring. Leaning in, I stretched out a hand. My fingers met the back panel. Solid. Cold. I tugged the rail. Immovable. Glanced down. Floorboards. Unremarkable. Pushed against the sides. Nothing yielded. Yet the impossible breeze stirred the fine hairs at my temples, emanating from nowhere. Minutes passed as I stood there, poised on the threshold, waiting for something. My legs grew leaden, shoulders bunched with tension. I listened. The whispering ebbed and flowed, like speech filtered through a layer of thin ice. Exhaustion eventually won. I closed the door, but sleep was unthinkable. The remainder of the night was spent roaming the apartment, flicking lights on and off, cracking windows, checking the empty hallway outside. Everywhere silence held sway, except for that wardrobe. The next evening I conceived a new test. I placed a small portable fan inside the wardrobe, leaving it unplugged. My hypothesis: if something manipulated the air, perhaps it would react to an external force. I waited until the groan commenced. Opening the door, stomach churning, I saw the fan sitting inert. The wardrobe's intrinsic cold current still flowed outward, palpable. I plugged the fan into a nearby socket, switched it to its lowest setting, aiming the airflow inwards. The outbound cold persisted, pushing against the fan's manufactured breeze, creating a strange turbulence near my face. I stepped back. The whispering intensified, taking on an irritated, almost agitated quality. It seemed to resent the intrusion. I switched the fan off. The murmuring subsided to its previous level. Heart pounding, I stared into the wardrobe's vacant darkness. Next, I tried a powerful flashlight. Its beam cut through the interior gloom, illuminating the plain wood grain of the back panel. No cracks, no hidden openings. The ceiling inside was smooth, unbroken. The floor matched my bedroom's. No source for the breeze could be found. No vents, no discernible gaps. I listened intently. The whispering was a constant whenever the door stood open. "I don't understand you," I said aloud, the words feeling futile. The susurrus continued, unchanging in pace or tone. I reached inside again, probing, pressing every square inch of the back panel, searching for a hidden mechanism. Solid, unyielding. Frustration mounted, my teeth clamped together until my jaw ached. A reckless idea formed. What if I tried to enter? The space was barely large enough, but I needed to know if physically occupying it would provoke a change. Removing the hangers, I piled them on my bed, then positioned myself before the open wardrobe. Bending low, I eased my head and shoulders into the opening. The cold enveloped me instantly, a full-body shiver racking my frame. Muscles seized. The whispering was now directly in my ears, intimate and utterly alien. I pushed forward slightly, bracing my chest against the empty air. Logically, my head should have met the back wall almost immediately. It didn't. The space seemed to deepen as I pressed into it. Startled, I jerked backward. Standing upright, I peered inside again. The flashlight beam confirmed the back wall was right there, less than arm's length away. Yet leaning in, there was more space. I had to try again. This time, slowly, deliberately. Crouching, I leaned forward, anticipating the impact of forehead against wood. Instead, my head passed through the expected boundary. A strange pressure clamped down on my shoulders, as if the wardrobe's frame itself was constricting, yet I continued moving forward. Darkness swallowed my peripheral vision. The flashlight, still clutched in my hand, illuminated only vacant expanse ahead. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. My breathing grew shallow, rapid. Ahead lay only shadow, a faint suggestion of more wardrobe-like space, which was patently impossible. Fear surged, sharp and cold. I scrambled back out, landing heavily on my bedroom floor, panting. I stared at the innocuous wardrobe. The whispering persisted. I slammed the door shut, leaning my back against the wall, legs trembling uncontrollably. My mind spun, grasping for an explanation that refused to materialize. My small, ordinary wardrobe contained impossible dimensions. A tether. I needed a tether. Rummaging through the apartment, I unearthed a long extension cord. One end secured firmly around the leg of my heavy bed frame, the other looped and knotted around my waist. My palms were slick with sweat. My shirt clung damply to my back. A heavy pressure settled in my chest, a primal warning against transgression. Taking a deep breath, I opened the wardrobe door again. The whispering surged to greet me, accompanied by the familiar rush of frigid air. This time I stepped fully inside, ducking beneath the frame. Keeping the flashlight beam aimed forward, I advanced cautiously. I expected to collide with the back wall within a single stride. Instead, I took one step, then another, then several more, into deepening emptiness. The wardrobe's interior was hushed, save for the omnipresent whispering and the faint echo of my own ragged breath. Turning, I could see the rectangular portal back to my bedroom. The lamp, the corner of the bed, the familiar wallpaper. Escape was still possible. Facing forward again, I swept the flashlight beam through the oppressive dark. Nothing, just void. The whispering seemed to swirl around me now, emanating from all directions at once. I tapped the floor with my foot, solid, surprisingly smooth, like polished stone. Bending, I touched it, ice cold. The air held no scent, neither musty nor decayed, just sterile, empty cold. I edged forward another step or two. A tingling sensation traced my spine. My mouth was utterly dry. Hello? I tried again, my voice cracking. I don't understand. The whispering continued its relentless cryptic flow. No objects interrupted the darkness, no shapes resolved. My flashlight beam simply dissipated into the infinite black. After a few more paces, I encountered resistance. Not a wall, but a gradual encroaching pressure, like walking into a narrowing passage that squeezed my shoulders, my chest. I stopped, tried to push slightly further. The pressure intensified, making my head feel heavy, my arms difficult to lift. The whispering swelled, louder, more insistent. My pulse hammered in my fingertips. I aimed the light upward. Only more darkness. Reaching out to the sides, my hands brushed smooth, cool surfaces that seemed to curve subtly inward. Panic flared. The thought of being trapped, swallowed by this impossible geometry, spurred me into retreat. I turned, walking back towards the light of my bedroom. With each step away from the pressure, the tightness in my chest eased. A few more strides, and I stumbled back through the frame, emerging into the familiar space of my room. I looked back at the wardrobe. It appeared utterly normal, a shallow wooden box containing only a rail. The scattered hangers lay on my bed. For the next couple of hours, I sat on the edge of my mattress, facing the closed wardrobe, consciously regulating my breathing. Cold sweat dried on my skin. I switched on every light in the room, bathing it in harsh illumination. The whispering seemed fainter now, subdued by the light but still audible if I focused. Rising, I approached the wardrobe one last time, needing confirmation. The chill still radiated from the wood. Leaning close, I heard the faint, dry murmuring from within. I did not open the door again. I simply stood there, feeling the residual cold, my hands still unsteady. The following day was spent elsewhere. Work, then lingering late at the office. Anything to delay returning. The thought of a hotel surfaced, but I dismissed it. Habit, or perhaps a deeper reluctance to be displaced, drew me home near midnight. I studiously avoided looking towards the wardrobe, didn't touch its handle. In bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling patterns, I waited. Around 3 the groan began, deeper this time, more resonant. I sat bolt upright. The door pulsed visibly. Cold air seeped through the seams around it. The whispering was a constant undertone. My heart rate spiked, my throat constricted. Throwing back the covers, I stood before the wardrobe again. My hand rested on the knob, feeling the faint, steady vibration beneath my palm. I turned it, opened the door just a fraction. The cold rushed out, stinging my eyes. I listened. The whispering felt different now, insistent, inviting, almost pleading for me to enter again. I stepped back decisively. For the remainder of the night, I turned my back to it, huddling in bed, awake. The sounds persisted for hours, a relentless auditory assault. Sleep was impossible. The next night mirrored the last. The wardrobe continued its siren call, the sibilant whispers, the impossible draft. I refused to go back inside. The unknown consequences of that deeper darkness held me captive in my own room. I could only sit, wait for the dawn, listening to the voice I could never comprehend, feeling the chill that defied explanation, watching the door tremble until the first fragile light of morning offered a temporary reprieve. The endless ribbon of highway had spooled out behind me for hours, each mile a monotonous echo of the last. Home was a siren song, pulling me forward, yet the fuel needle quivered precariously near oblivion. A reluctant surrender to necessity arrived in the form of sputtering, hesitant lights far ahead, a lone constellation against the ink-dark canvas. Pulling off felt like stepping onto a forgotten stage, the gas station clinging precariously to the roadside, flanked by barren fields and the skeletal fingers of wind-scoured trees. Only a solitary pump stood sentinel, a rust-wept relic with paint flaking like sunburnt skin. I cut the engine, the sudden silence profound, as if the world itself held its breath. The air, brittle with cold, bit at my exposed skin. Grasping the worn cold nozzle, a disquietude coiled low in my gut. Petrol began its slow, gurgling journey into the tank, the clicks of the meter punctuating the oppressive hush like a morbid clock. My gaze swept the perimeter, probing the long, thin shadows cast by the station's weak illumination, seeking movement where there was none, only the vacant lot and the desolate quiet. Then a voice smooth as riverstone sliced the silence. Assistance required. I jolted, heart hammering against my ribs, spinning to face him. He seemed to have materialized from the gloom itself, unnoticed until he spoke. Tall, gaunt, with a complexion like old parchment and eyes dark as chips of obsidian reflecting the meager light. "No, I'm managing," I managed, the words catching in my throat. He remained motionless, a few feet distant, his void-like eyes fixed on me with an unnerving intensity, as if dissecting something unseen. Ignoring the prickle of unease, I feigned focus on the pump, the numbers crawling upward with agonizing slowness. Traveling unaccompanied. His voice was a low murmur, tinged with something unreadable. Curiosity? Amusement? A brittle smile felt unnatural on my lips. Yes, just passing through. He offered a slow, deliberate nod, his gaze never wavering, a physical weight upon me. A lonely stretch. Few find reason to pause here, he observed, almost conversationally. Yet the air thickened. The pump clicked off, a final sigh. With fumbling haste, I secured the nozzle, twisted the gas cap tight, desperate now only for the sanctuary of my car, for distance. As I slid behind the wheel, his parting words drifted across the cold air, a silken threat. Travel safely. No reply formed. The engine roared to life, a defiant sound in the stillness. One final glance in the rearview mirror, he stood exactly where I'd left him, an unmoving sentinel against the station's dim glow, face impassive, eyes lost in shadow. I accelerated onto the highway, merging back into the void, hands clenching the wheel, the encounter replaying, sharp and unwelcome. It was nothing, I insisted inwardly, just an odd local at a decaying outpost. Yet the chill lingered, a premonition I couldn't dismiss. Miles dissolved into the darkness. A fragile sense of relief began to bloom, fragile as glass, only to be shattered. Twin stars ignited in my rearview mirror, distant but growing, closing the gap with predatory speed. A knot of ice formed in my stomach. Surely not. Just another traveler on this desolate artery. But denial warred with a primal instinct as the light swelled, burning brighter, drawing inexorably closer. The vehicle behind matched my pace, tailing me relentless, its headlights searing the mirror, flooding the cabin with stark invasive light. I squinted, trying to ignore it, focusing on the hypnotic white lines rushing beneath me. Then strobing bursts of white fury assaulted my vision, high beams flashing, blinding. I couldn't discern the driver, only the hulking silhouette behind me, too close, suffocatingly close. My teeth clenched. Just as abruptly, the assault ceased. The car eased back slightly, creating a sliver of breathing room. I risked another glance into the mirror, and froze. The mirror framed him. The spectral face from the gas station, the obsidian eyes locked onto mine. Visceral cold flooded my veins. My foot mashed the accelerator. The engine screamed its protest as the speedometer needle climbed. Asphalt was devoured beneath the tires. Why? The question hammered uselessly against the rising panic. Escape was the only imperative. The road stretched ahead, a black, empty maw. But his pursuit was a shadow clinging tight, his headlights a constant glaring presence in my mirror, mirroring my every move. Minutes stretched into an eternity of hunted flight. Then, a sliver of darkness branched off the main highway, a narrow side road disappearing into woods. A desperate gamble. Without conscious thought, I wrenched the wheel, plunging into the narrow artery. Trees clawed at the windows, their branches skeletal fingers against the glass, creating a claustrophobic tunnel. The road twisted sharply. I checked the mirror, reflecting only blackness. Had I lost him? A fragile bloom of hope unfurled, my breath catching in my throat. Shattered. Resurrected beams sliced through the suffocating dark behind me, illuminating the gnarled trees. He was back, closer now, inescapable, his car practically fused to my bumper. Panic surged. I pushed the car harder, the engine whining, tires screeching on the tight curves. Then, the road abruptly birthed a small clearing, a dead-end patch of naked earth. Nowhere left to run. I skidded to a halt, slamming the brakes, heart pounding like a drum against my ribs. His vehicle slid in behind, sealing the exit, headlights pinning my car like an insect in their harsh glare. Trapped. My breath came in short, ragged gasps, waiting. His door opened. A figure detached itself from the blinding light, a silhouette steeped in menace. I couldn't see his face, hidden in the glare and shadow, but I felt his unseen eyes, cold and appraising. Paralyzed, impotent. He began to advance, slow, inexorable steps crunching on the dirt, closing the distance with terrifying calm. My trembling hand fumbled for my phone, a useless brick displaying only no service. Utterly alone. He kept coming, each step deliberate. His shape loomed beside my window. In that instant, primal instinct jolted me. Gear slammed into reverse, accelerator crushed to the floor. The car lurched backward, tires clawing at the loose earth, spitting gravel. I wrenched the wheel, spinning the car violently, aiming blindly back toward the narrow road, the only escape. I refused to look back, didn't dare. I just drove, plunging back into the swallowing dark, propelled by sheer terror. His lights receded in the mirror, flickered and were finally extinguished. I didn't slow, didn't stop. Didn't look back until the garish sanctuary of the next town's lights bloomed ahead. Pulling into the fluorescent glare of a brightly lit populated gas station, my engine ticked loudly in the sudden quiet. Tremors still racked my hands, my breath hitched in my chest. I scanned the periphery, the well-lit forecourt, the adjacent road. Empty. He had vanished like a phantom. I sat there for a long time, the adrenaline ebbing away, leaving a hollow ache and a residue of fear. The memory remained, imprinted sharp and cold. The desolate station, his chilling gaze, the haunting pursuit. Some lonely outposts are best left undisturbed, their silence unbroken, their watchers unseen. A premonition should have surfaced, sharp and unwelcome, when Miss Vance, the estate agent, found her gaze incapable of meeting mine whenever the cellar arose in conversation. Her eyes clung desperately to the clipboard, a flimsy shield as she recited the virtues of original parquet flooring and the recently modernized circuitry. Yet here I sit, 3 months swallowed by this house, the kitchen clock bleeding 3 a.m., while phantom footfalls reverberate from the depth below. The chilling query echoes louder than the steps. Have I orchestrated the paramount blunder of my existence? Initially, the dwelling radiated promise. Erected in 1932, its bones were good, awaiting revitalization. The price tag felt like a misprint, startlingly low for this enclave, a discrepancy I rationalized away by blaming the antiquated kitchen and washrooms. 2 feverish months were consumed by transformation. Gleaming appliances installed, walls breathing fresh paint, fixtures gleaming with modernity. Locks and portals were systematically replaced, all save one, the formidable barrier to the cellar. Hewn from solid oak, it retained an ancient defiance. 3 deadbolts, affixed by predecessors, struck me as wildly excessive. Hindsight offers a bitter clarity. The first fissure in normalcy appeared roughly a week post-renovation. Returning from the day's labors, I discovered the cellar door yawning open, a warm rectangle of light staining the hallway floorboards. The memory was diamond sharp. Securing all 3 deadbolts that very morning, a ritual already ingrained. Inspection revealed untampered locks. Nothing pilfered, nothing disturbed. Only that stubborn door swung wide, an implicit invitation to descend the shadowed stairs. I persuaded myself it was merely negligence, a lapse in my routine. The subsequent morning, vigilance became obsession. Each deadbolt clicked, tested, thrice confirmed before I departed. That evening the scene repeated. Door agape. The cellar lights, fixtures I studiously ignored, the switch inconveniently located at the stairs' foot, blazed. A tremor seized my hands as I navigated the descent. Emptiness greeted me as always. Bare concrete skeletal pipes, a scattering of boxes containing festive remnants yet unpacked. The light switch remained resolutely down, in the off position, mocking the fluorescent tubes burning above. Flicking it yielded nothing. Exasperated, I unscrewed the bulbs one by one, plunging the space into abrupt welcome darkness. My next tactic involved an industrial-grade padlock, the kind securing anonymous storage units. I fastened it, yanked hard for reassurance, and ventured out. The outcome perhaps is predictable. Upon my return, the door stood open, the padlock resting placidly, intact, upon the floor. And overhead, newly installed fluorescent bulbs cast their sterile glare. Superstition holds no sway over me. Ghosts, demons, the phantasmagoria of the supernatural. These are fictions I dismiss. Yet the testimony of my own senses, the tightening knot of dread coiling in my gut, these I cannot ignore. Daily, relentlessly, Irrespective of the locking mechanisms employed or the fortifications erected, that threshold breaches itself. Sometimes auditory disturbances accompany it, steps ascending or descending the stairs, the grating rasp of furniture dragged across concrete, muffled impacts like falling objects. Always investigation reveals only void. Last week saw the installation of surveillance, one lens fixed upon the cellar door, another surveying the stairwell's base, a third encompassing the main subterranean chamber. The captured footage offered zero explanation. The door, closed in one frame, gaped open in the next. The transition instantaneous, devoid of visible agency. Lights flared into existence while the switch remained static. The cameras faithfully recorded the disembodied sounds I heard, yet displayed only an untenanted room. I resorted to cruder methods, barricading the door. Stout 2x4s, arranged in an X, were driven into the frame with 3-inch screws. Returning home, I found the timbers not fractured or splintered, but meticulously removed. The screws lay in a neat, almost mocking line upon the floor, the planks stacked tidily against the adjacent wall. The previous occupants vanished without a trace, leaving no forwarding address. Ms. Vance professes ignorance regarding their contact details. County archives reveal a dizzying turnover. 8 ownership changes in 2 decades, no resident enduring beyond 18 months. That statistic should have screamed caution. Last night marked an escalation. Ensconced in the living room, seeking refuge in the television's flickering inanity, a novel sound drifted up from below. Humming. A low, meandering, tuneless drone, the sound of someone idly humming during mundane tasks. It persisted for hours. Sleep became an impossibility. This morning, a locksmith installed the zenith of security technology. Biometric fingerprint recognition, redundant keypad entry, the works. A small fortune expended. I returned from work mere moments ago. The door is open. The sophisticated lock remains operational, blinking innocuously. And now, rooted to my kitchen chair, I hear footsteps traversing the cellar stairs. Slow, deliberate, ascending to the landing, pausing, then descending once more. Again and again. Rationality scrambles for purchase. A gas leak? Inspected twice. Negative. Carbon monoxide. 3 detectors deployed, all stubbornly reading normal. Mischievous local youths? Utterly implausible. My surveillance network would ensnare any physical intruder. Besides, the door yields even when I am present, mere feet away. The humming has resumed. Louder tonight, imbued with a new insistence. My phone diligently records audio, yet playback offers only a blizzard of static. The cameras persist in showing an empty cellar, even as the sound of furniture being dragged scrapes directly beneath my feet. A priest visited last week, not from belief, but from desperation's narrowing options. He blessed the dwelling, scattered droplets of holy water across the cellar's every surface, recited prayers in solemn Latin. For precisely 24 hours following his departure, the door remained quiescent. Then, laughter erupted from the depths, genuine echoing laughter that climbed the stairs. Upon inspection, every trace of holy water had been meticulously wiped clean. The constabulary offer no solace. Explaining invokes perceived madness, and lacking tangible evidence of forced entry or criminal damage, their hands are tied. Friends have ceased visiting. The spontaneous opening of the door, the capricious lights, the unsettling hum. These phenomena breed discomfort. I cannot fault them. Selling occurs to me, a tempting escape, yet I recoil from inflicting this upon another soul. Honesty would preclude any sale, Deceit feels like a deeper contamination. Whatever entity resides here, its burden must remain mine. The footfalls have ceased. Now scratching commences. Like fingernails drawn across rough concrete, it travels along the unseen walls, drawing nearer to the stairs. A sound previously unheard. Sweat slicks my palms as I commit this account to my laptop, a desperate chronicle. The scratching reaches the stairwell's apex. The door remains open, spilling its warm, deceptive light. Flight screams as the logical imperative. Flee, drive, never look back. But my entire substance is interwoven with this structure. Finances, effort, aspirations. Abandonment feels like amputation. The scratching halts. The humming returns, altered. Words hover at the edge of perception, tantalizingly close. Concentration almost resolves them. Almost. Some nights refuge is sought in my car, yet even from there, the cellar windows pulse with erratic light, a beacon of the house's affliction. The neighbors observe. Their glances when I return from work linger with unspoken questions as I hesitate on my own driveway, gathering the fortitude to cross the threshold. Yesterday, a different approach. A chair positioned directly facing the open cellar doorway. An all-day vigil. The humming ceased. The footsteps fell silent. An unnatural quietude descended, but a brief visit to the washroom was punished by a crash from below. Returning swiftly, I found one of my packed cartons overturned, its contents strewn violently across the concrete floor. I document this, needing anchorage, needing someone somewhere to comprehend the unfolding reality. The scratching has begun anew. It progresses down the hallway towards this kitchen where I sit paralyzed. A dragging accompanies it now, something substantial, heavy. The cameras maintain their silent vigil, depicting empty spaces. Yet the sound advances, undeniably real. It has acquired a wetness, a viscous sliding across the floorboards. The humming swells, louder, the near words almost coalescing into meaning. A contractor is scheduled for tomorrow. The directive, permanent obliteration. Brick up the doorway, conceal it behind drywall, erase its very existence from the house's anatomy. It represents the final stratagem. Should this fail, the dragging sound is just outside the kitchen entrance now. The humming abruptly cuts off. Silence descends, broken only by the frantic rhythm of my own breath and that repellent, sliding friction. Cellar lights flicker, throwing grotesque dancing shadows into the hallway. I must disseminate this record, post it somewhere, anywhere, a testament, a warning for whoever might follow. The air plummets in temperature, my breath ghosts before me. The sliding sound is directly behind my chair. I should have pressed Miss Vance harder when her gaze faltered. I should have interrogated the purpose of 3 deadbolts. I should have registered the neighbor's peculiar avoidance of my side of the street. The cellar lights just extinguished completely. I will not turn. I will not turn. I will not turn. But I feel it. Breath, cold and ancient upon the back of my neck. Funds evaporated again, haven't they? Chloe's voice, laced with familiar mockery, found Eliza fumbling through the contents of her worn leather wallet. We stood anchored before the automated teller outside Sterling Mutual Bank. A final pilgrimage before the promise of pizza at Sal's beckoned. Friday evening draped the street in a peculiar quietude. Commerce had largely shuttered, save for the unwavering fluorescent hum of the all-night apothecary across the intersection. Some of us navigate without the cushion of familial platinum, Eliza retorted, the plastic edge of her debit card finally surfacing between her fingers. Dusk bled into the air, deepening the blue luminescence radiating from the ATM screen, a beacon whose electronic pulse had become a bi-weekly rhythm since university began. Chloe, affecting nonchalance, leaned against the cool brickwork, her thumb tracing hypnotic scrolls across her phone screen while Eliza keyed in her secret digits. That's when the sound began, a low sibilant murmur swelling insistently as it drew near. A figure emerged from the periphery, a woman clad in a dress bearing the ghosts of old stains, her gait disjointed puppet-like as she conversed fiercely with the empty air. "Just don't engage," Chloe whispered, instinctively shrinking closer to Eliza. "Let's get the cash and vanish." But the woman's gaze, previously unfocused, snagged on us. Her trajectory shifted with jarring abruptness, a beeline straight for the ATM alcove. Her phantom dialogue escalated, acquiring a frantic edge. Eliza's fingers faltered on the touchscreen, the request for withdrawal blurring. Proximity sharpened the woman's words. "They're listening. Always. Through the wires, the circuits, the money itself. They catalog everything." She halted directly behind us, swaying precariously. Eliza felt Chloe stiffen beside her, a shared tension masked by forced stillness, even as internal sirens blared. The woman's reflection materialized ghost-like on the glowing screen, her eyes wide, adrift. "You're with them," she suddenly accused, her voice cracking into a shriek as her hand clamped onto Chloe's forearm. "Using their poison machines, transmitting their signals." Chloe wrenched her arm away. We retreated from the machine, the transaction aborted, forgotten. "We don't want any trouble," Eliza stated, her voice steadier than she felt, placing herself as a fragile barrier between Chloe and the agitated woman. "We're just going." Her words dissolved unheard. The woman plunged a hand into the folds of her dress, retrieving something that caught the amber streetlight. A mere fistful of coins, yet clutched with the desperate fervor of weaponry. Her arm swung, launching the copper and nickel missiles. "Signals. Lies," she screamed, a maelstrom of conspiracy erupting around her. A penny struck Eliza's cheek, a sharp metallic sting. Instinct took over. We pivoted, sprinting toward the sole bastion of light and normalcy, the pharmacy. Behind us, the woman's cries ricocheted off the silent facades. Through the wide glass panes, Eliza saw the pharmacist, his name tag identifying him as Henderson, already lifting a phone receiver, his expression one of weary recognition. The automatic doors hissed open just as another volley of coins clattered against the pavement behind us. We plunged inside, the antiseptic air a sudden balm. Henderson's finger decisively stabbed the lock button. A moment later, the woman slammed against the reinforced glass, her screams muffled but undiminished. The doors held. "Authorities are en route," Henderson announced, his tone remarkably level as he ushered us deeper into the brightly lit aisles. "She's caused disturbances here before, needs support, but she hasn't been willing to accept it." From a back room, another employee appeared, proffering bottles of water with quiet solicitude. Outside, the woman paced, a captive storm oscillating between frantic diatribes directed at us and murmured colloquies with her invisible companions. Her movements grew wilder, yet the locked entrance remained impassable. When the police cruiser arrived, it wasn't with flashing lights and commands, but with a quiet competence. A crisis intervention specialist emerged first, her voice a soft, unwavering counterpoint to the woman's distress. Time stretched, measuring the gradual subsidence of agitation, until finally, painstakingly, the woman agreed to go, to accept the offered hand toward care. That night rippled outward, altering the quiet fabric of our neighborhood. Sterling Mutual fortified the ATM alcove with brighter illumination and watchful electronic eyes. The pharmacy formalized its role, christening itself a designated safe haven, its staff trained for crises. Other local businesses mirrored the initiative. Mental health collectives intensified their outreach, weaving threads of support through the community, aiming to mend fraying edges before they tore completely. The police force bolstered its crisis intervention team, emphasizing dialogue over confrontation, connection over containment. Chloe and Eliza found themselves drawn into the current, volunteering with a campus group dedicated to mental wellness and safety protocols. We learned the subtle lexicon of crisis, the delicate balance between empathy and self-preservation, the crucial knowledge of when and how to summon aid. Henderson's pharmacy evolved beyond mere refuge. It became a nexus. He spearheaded training sessions, forging a network of sanctuaries where vulnerability could find temporary shelter. A tangible shift. The bank relocated its automated teller to a secure indoor vestibule, accessible around the clock via card swipe, complete with a discreet assistance button linked to both security dispatch and crisis services. Other financial institutions soon followed suit. And the woman? Months drifted by. We encountered her again, unexpectedly. Grounded, lucid, her apology quiet but sincere. A support worker, a reassuring presence at her side. She was cautiously rethreading herself into the community tapestry, even sharing her story at awareness events, a testament to the transformative power of accepted help. Just last week, Eliza observed a young student hesitating near the bank vestibule, her gaze fixed anxiously on a man exhibiting erratic behavior nearby. Without a second thought, Eliza guided her across the street to the pharmacy. Henderson welcomed her with the same unruffled efficiency he'd shown us on that frightening night. The incident had etched a profound lesson onto our understanding of communal well-being. It wasn't merely about barricading ourselves against perceived threats, but about architecting systems of mutual support. Sometimes the figure radiating menace is the one most desperately signaling a need for rescue. Now, approaching an ATM involves a recalibrated awareness, not just scanning for danger, but remaining attuned to signs of distress. That emergency button represents more than a panic switch. It's a conduit to a web of assistance. Safety, we learned, transcends locks and lumens and surveillance feeds. It resides in the intricate, deliberate construction of communities vigilant for all their members, discerning the nuance between peril and pain, knowing instinctively when to shield and when to succor. The coins from that encounter, gathered later from the pavement, now reside in a glass jar on Henderson's counter. Not relics of fear, but currency of change. Each copper disc, each nickel sphere, a small potent symbol of compassion forged in crisis, of communal resilience, and the quiet essential grace of showing up for one another when the world feels suddenly, terrifyingly fragile. This is the whole chronicle, precisely as I've endured it. Never did I imagine a mere furnishing could fracture my perception of reality. Yet here I stand, orbiting my own living room, casting apprehensive glances toward a venerable armchair as if expecting it to lurch upright. A frantic drumbeat starts in my chest whenever proximity shrinks. My nerves anticipate a grasp, a sudden hold. I acquired that armchair from an auctioneer's block, driven by a penchant for relics, never forecasting it would become the epicenter of my disquiet. Still, the evidence of my senses, what I've witnessed, what I've felt since ushering it across my threshold, cannot be easily dismissed. Something is fundamentally awry. My first encounter with the chair occurred a fortnight past. I was navigating a modest estate sale alongside my friend Leo. Antiques draw me, their solidity, the palpable weight of history they possess. This particular specimen arrested my attention, its crimson damask faded, its timber arms polished to a sheen by generations of contact. I recall noting the fraying welt along the cushion's edge, the intricately carved legs speaking of bygone decades. European late 19th century, the auctioneer declared, likely continental. That provenance alone ignited my collector's spark. A raised paddle, a reasonable sum offered, and it was mine with startlingly little contest. Transported home, I situated it hearthside in my living room, a space comfortable if occasionally constrained by its population of other time-worn pieces. The armchair radiated an unexpected invitation despite its age. Its deep red upholstery seemed to drink the overhead light, catching a subtle luster, while the worn patches on the armrests whispered tales, lending it profound character. Initially, pride swelled within me. A cursory wipe banished the dust, and then I sank into its embrace, head tilted back, attempting to savor the acquisition. That marked the first instance, a distinct, inexplicable coolness caressing the nape of my neck, sharp as if a window stood ajar behind me. I rose, surveyed every casement, confirmed each sealed tight. The room's ambient temperature remained constant. A phantom draft, I reasoned, perhaps mere fancy. I resolved to disregard it. Yet, over the subsequent days, the phenomenon recurred with unnerving fidelity each time I occupied the armchair. Always that frigid exhalation against my skin. I'd pivot, searching for a fissure, a vent misplaced, but invariably found nothing amiss. Soon a deeper malaise crept in while I read or watched television. The potent impression of observation settled upon me, an uncanny certainty of a presence standing just beyond my line of sight. Swift turns revealed only emptiness. Still my skin would prickle, my palms grow clammy. My respiration would quicken. Sometimes, compelled by sheer unease, I'd stand and perform a full circuit of the room, seeking tangible proof of my solitude. A week elapsed before one particular evening nearly propelled me to haul the offending furniture out onto the pavement. I was attempting post-work repose within its confines. A stiffness in my shoulders prompted me to lean forward, massaging the back of my neck. Abruptly, without preamble, a gentle pressure materialized on the chair's crest rail, akin to a hand lightly placed. I sprang upward, heart slamming against my ribs, just in time to witness the armchair execute a slight backward tilt. It settled instantly, almost as if mimicking the sudden departure of another occupant. That subtle motion sent an electric jolt through my system. My chest constricted. A fearful heat bloomed across my face. Sleep proved elusive that night, my gaze repeatedly snagged by the chair's silhouette, visible from my bedroom threshold. Dawn brought resolve. A thorough examination was warranted. Heaving the chair onto its side, I scrutinized its underbelly. The springs, the webbing, the stuffing. My expectation was mundane. Perhaps loose tacks, clumps of archaic padding. Instead, snagged within the coils of a spring, I discovered a fragment of textile. It bore no resemblance to the crimson damask. This was a drab, indeterminate gray, possessing the coarse texture of linen or hessian. Peculiar dark stains marred its surface, resembling oily smudges more than anything else. Not red, not brown. Unlikely blood, yet profoundly unsettling. I stood clutching the small scrap, pondering its origins. Was it remnant of some earlier upholstery layer, or a keepsake from a prior owner? Its feel was peculiar, stiff, as though permeated by some long-dried substance. I sealed the fabric scrap within a plastic pouch and consigned it to a drawer, The notion of contacting the auction house surfaced, then receded, tinged with embarrassment. Voicing concerns over a peculiar bit of cloth felt hyperbolic. Besides, definitive answers seemed improbable. This discovery did little to assuage my discomfort. Merely passing the chair now induced a knot of tension low in my gut. I persisted in my attempts at rationalization, labeling myself overwrought, jumpy. A few evenings later, I invited Leo over, partly for company, partly as an unwitting experiment. Would he perceive anything anomalous? Pizza and beer lubricated conversation on trivial matters. The armchair remained in its customary position near the fireplace. Leo claimed the sofa. I, steeling myself, took the chair, feigning casualness despite the internal tremor. Initially, normalcy prevailed. Then, perhaps an hour into our visit, the familiar icy current touched my neck. I fought the urge to react, striving to maintain conversational flow, even as the fine hairs there bristled. Leo cast an inquisitive glance my way, asking if I was all right. I managed a nod. Moments later, he excused himself. The instant the bathroom door clicked shut behind him, a soft creak emanated from the armchair, the distinct sound of weight shifting on the cushion. My pulse surged. Slowly, deliberately, I rose. As I gained my feet, the chair rocked, a gentle forward pitch, then back, as if settling after someone else had just vacated it. Leo re-entered the room at that precise moment, catching my transfixed stare. I feigned a stretch. He departed later, oblivious, mentioning nothing untoward, but the conviction that the chair possessed independent motion lodged itself firmly in my mind. Sleep, once again, was a fraught, restless affair. The following day saw me relocating the armchair to a different corner, testing a hypothesis. Could the room's configuration, a quirk of the floorboards, or a hidden draft be responsible? The effort proved futile. No matter its placement, the atmosphere surrounding it felt tainted, heavy. Proximity bred tension. My shoulders would instinctively hunch, a nauseous churn starting in my stomach. It reached a point where sitting in it became unthinkable. That weekend, engaged in the ritual of cleaning, vacuuming carpets, dusting surfaces, I postponed interaction with the armchair as long as feasible. Eventually, necessity dictated I move it to cleanse the space beneath. Grasping the wooden arms, I registered their wear more acutely than before. The grain, smoothed by countless hands, bore ridges and depressions. Sections were chipped. Beneath the arms, several deep gouges scarred the wood, evoking the image of long fingernails digging in with frantic force. I found myself mesmerized by these marks, asymmetrical, haphazard, violent. A wave of queasiness washed over me. Tipping the chair onto its back once more for cleaning, I noted the slight oxidation on the springs. No further alien fragments revealed themselves, yet the memory of the gray cloth persisted. My breathing grew shallow, the chill returning to my neck despite the still air. A frantic scan of the room yielded nothing. Righting the chair, I hastened through my remaining chores, consciously averting my gaze from the damned thing. Several days passed without significant incident, though my self-imposed exile from the chair remained absolute. Then, arriving home late one afternoon, weary from work, I entered the living room. My eyes immediately fell upon the armchair. It seemed subtly askew, nudged from its usual alignment. Had I left it so angled? Drawing nearer, I observed a distinct depression in the seat cushion, the unmistakable impression of a recent occupant. Simultaneously, I detected a faint, stale odor, cold, reminiscent of damp earth or an old cellar. My legs felt suddenly insubstantial. I stared, half convinced it might stir before my very eyes. Seconds stretched, suspended in silence. That night, attempting distraction via a film watched from the sofa, my senses remained hyper-alert. Soft creaks punctuated the quiet, floorboards settling, furniture groaning, or perhaps something else. Discerning the source felt impossible. At one juncture, turning instinctively, I perceived the armchair undergoing a minute rocking motion. It wasn't designed to rock. Its 4 legs stood firm, yet it moved as if responding to an invisible shift in weight. My throat constricted. No rational explanation offered itself. Rising, I approached it, heart hammering, palm slick with sweat. As I stood directly before it, the motion ceased. I reached out, my trembling fingers brushing the fabric on the chair back. It felt unnaturally cold. A tentative push resulted only in a mundane wobble, congruent with my force. Frustrated, I retreated. After confirming all doors were securely locked, I returned to the relative safety of the sofa. Scarcely a minute later, the faint, familiar breeze ghosted across the back of my neck. I bolted upright, spun around, and saw the armchair shift again, perhaps by a mere fraction of an inch. So slight was the movement, I almost distrusted my vision, yet the certainty remained. Bedtime found me frayed, every nerve exposed. I left a lamp burning in the living room, unable to bear the thought of that chair shrouded in complete darkness. Hours were spent awake, staring down the hallway, ears straining for any sound, eyes seeking any flicker of movement from the adjacent room. Sleep, when it finally claimed me, offered little respite. Morning spurred another look at the enigmatic fabric scrap. Retrieving the plastic pouch from its kitchen drawer confinement, I examined the dull gray fragment once more. The dark blotches remained unchanged. Odorless, non-adhesive, simply the rainbody, like ancient indelible stains. Could it have originated from a hidden compartment? Or perhaps a piece of clothing belonging to someone intimately connected with the chair? An online search proved fruitless, yielding nothing specific. The idea of consulting a laboratory felt drastic, yet the escalating phenomena demanded consideration. I contacted a local antique restorer, outlining a need for assessment regarding structural issues in an old armchair. Prudence dictated omitting the more bizarre details. I simply mentioned discovering an old piece of fabric and expressed a desire for a professional opinion. He cited a full schedule but offered a potential visit several weeks hence. Cold comfort for my present state, yet it represented a tangible step. And so, I resolved to wait, clinging to the hope that an expert might unearth a mundane explanation. Faulty springs, perhaps, or a peculiar pocket of trapped air causing the movements. Deep within, however, skepticism reigned. Mundane mechanics felt insufficient to account for the phantom chill or the pervasive sensation of being watched. In the interim, my living room became almost forbidden territory. Television viewing migrated to the bedroom. Meals were taken at the small kitchen table. Even reading found a new venue at my desk in the spare room. Each passage past the living room doorway felt like wading through thickened air. The conviction persisted. Someone, something resided in that armchair, turning silently to observe my transit. My heart rate would invariably spike, propelling me hastily onward. One evening, returning from errands, I unlocked my front door and stepped into the entryway. The living room lay to my left. Though the overhead light remained off, illumination from a street lamp filtered through the window, sculpting the armchair's familiar silhouette. It appeared ordinary until my focus sharpened. The seat cushion bore a profound central depression, precisely as if someone were seated there. I remained rooted in the doorway, keys clenched so tightly my knuckles cracked. The indentation suggested a human form, yet no figure was visible. Panic constricted my breath, blurring the edges of my vision. With trembling fingers, I flicked the light switch. The cushion remained deeply compressed. A step forward, my heart beat a deafening roar in my ears. As I advanced, the cushion began, with excruciating slowness, to regain its shape, the fabric smoothing itself out. Absolute silence reigned, save for the low hum of the refrigerator. My stomach lurched violently. Backing away, I stumbled into the kitchen, nearly dropping my keys. A feeling of entrapment warred with the urge to flee my own home. After composing myself for several minutes, I armed myself with a flashlight and marched back, sweeping the beam across the armchair and its surroundings. Nothing. It presented as utterly normal once more. Since that night, the debate rages internally. Dispose of the armchair. Yet a deeper apprehension holds me back, a nagging fear of provoking some unknown consequence should I attempt to drag it curbside, or more drastically, destroy it. This dread lacks rational foundation, I concede, yet the experiences are undeniable. Thoughts of dismantling it, even burning it, flicker through my mind, but remain unacted upon. Instead, it remains a silent, brooding presence, daring it almost to reveal itself more fully in the light of day, and it obliges always subtly, perpetuating a low hum of anxiety. The restorer's promised visit looms, still a week distant. I mark the days, yearning for a prosaic solution, misaligned springs, trapped air currents. But conviction wanes. Such explanations feel threadbare against the chill breath on my neck, the unwavering gaze I feel upon me. Tonight my resolve firms. I will occupy the living room, lights ablaze. My phone will be close at hand, ready to capture tangible evidence should phenomena manifest. Proof for myself above all that sanity remains intact, or if not, confirmation of its departure. Even now, as I conclude this account, I perceive a subtle disturbance in the air behind me. A familiar tingling traverses my neck. I resist the urge to turn, yet the armchair's presence feels potent, almost sentient, as if privy to my very thoughts. My palms are damp, my stomach coiled tight. Swallowing achieves little against the dryness in my mouth. Perhaps it signifies nothing. Perhaps my grip on reason is loosening. But the reality of my experience remains immutable. That armchair is more than mere antique. It is a vessel. And whatever it contains, I feel it now, intimately close. Watching, listening, waiting. For the present, it shares my home. Dawn revealed the intrusion. Etched into the damp earth, a perfect circlet of footprints embraced my tent. No nocturnal disturbance had registered, no rustle, no snap of twig, yet here lay the stark evidence. Solitude in these sprawling woodlands was an illusion I had merely entertained. I had sought refuge in the embrace of the Olympic Peninsula's deep forests, a pilgrimage away from the cacophony and collapse of my urban existence. Life had recently dealt a double blow, a relationship fractured beyond repair, a career abruptly terminated, leaving me adrift. Time alone, immersed in the untamed, felt essential, a necessary balm to rediscover the self buried beneath the weight of the world. A solitary trek, just my thoughts and the vast breathing wilderness. The prescription seemed flawless. 3 days I journeyed deeper, pushing into the backcountry, the satisfying ache in my muscles a counterpoint to the crystalline air filling my lungs. Yesterday dusk had unveiled the ideal haven, a diminutive clearing beside a stream that murmured over smooth stones, ancient cedars standing sentinel around it. Pitching the small shelter, coaxing flames from dry tinder, A profound quietude had descended, the first true peace I'd known in an age. That tranquility fractured irrevocably the instant my zipper parted the tent flap this morning. The prints, immense, dwarfing my own boot marks, driven deep into the yielding soil by significant weight, and their sheer number, forming that immaculate ring, suggested a methodical nocturnal patrol around my vulnerable position. A coldness, entirely unrelated to the crisp dawn air, slithered along my spine. Encounters with forest denizens, shy deer, even a lumbering black bear once, were part of the pact. But this felt calculated. Rationality demanded purchase. An animal, I insisted silently. Curious, territorial, nothing more. Breathe. Yet the wisdom of relocation felt undeniable. As I began dismantling my temporary home, a sharp crack echoed from the tree line behind me. I spun, heart vaulting into my throat. The woods remained impassive, a wall of silent trunks and deep shadow, offering no clue. Still, the unnerving certainty of unseen eyes persisted, a prickling awareness of being observed from the concealing gloom. My movements accelerated, gear crammed into my pack with frantic imprecision. Another sound, a heavy rustling among fallen leaves, too substantial for squirrel or jay. Again I pivoted, eyes raking the forest edge. Was that? A fleeting distortion, a shape denser than the shadows it inhabited, vanishing the moment I tried to focus. Pack-shouldered, abandoning the usual rituals of dousing the fire pit or performing a final sight sweep, escape became the sole imperative. I chose a vector away from the perceived disturbance and plunged into the trees, my stride quickening toward a desperate flight. The wilderness transformed. No longer a sanctuary, it felt menacing, imbued with latent threat. Every shadow seemed to coalesce into watching forms, each forest noise a jolt to my frayed nerves. I fumbled with my map, attempting to orient myself toward the main trail, but trembling hands rendered the lines a meaningless spiderweb. An hour or so passed, marked by ragged breaths and frantic scanning, before I dared slacken my pace. The initial surge of panic subsided, leaving a corrosive anxiety churning low in my gut. Nothing further seen, nothing heard. Had I succumbed to paranoia? Was it merely some large creature, its curiosity sated? A fallen giant offered respite. I sank onto the mossy bark, drawing deeply from my water bottle. Lowering it, my gaze snagged on stillness amidst the trees. 50 yards distant, perhaps, framed between two colossal firs, stood a figure. My breath hitched. It possessed a humanoid silhouette, yet felt intrinsically wrong. Impossibly tall, unnaturally slender, its limbs held at angles that defied anatomical comfort, inducing a visceral revulsion. Utterly motionless, it regarded me. I blinked fiercely, convinced of hallucination born of fear and isolation. My eyes reopened. It remained. Closer now. Scrambling upright, I nearly sprawled over the log. The figure glided forward a step. In that instant I glimpsed its face, or rather the absence of one. Where features should have resided, there was only smooth alabaster skin, an unnerving blankness. A scream gathered, hot and sharp, but terror clamped it tight within my chest. I turned and ran, map forgotten, trail irrelevant. Away. Only away mattered. Undergrowth tore at me, branches lashing bare skin. Behind I sensed it, a pursuit conducted with uncanny speed and silence through the dense woods. Faster I pushed, yet the gap felt perpetually closing. A backward glance, instantly regretted. It was there, impossibly near, mere feet away, elongated arms reaching. A final desperate surge propelled me forward, boots finding purchase on the uneven forest floor until suddenly they found only air. My foot snagged a root, hidden, treacherous, and I was pitching forward, tumbling down a precipitous slope I hadn't even registered. The world became a chaotic blur of impact and disorientation, bouncing off rocks, scraping through brush. Pain flared, sharp and blinding. Then, abruptly, stillness. I lay sprawled at the gully's base, the force of the landing having expelled all air from my lungs. For a dreadful moment, suffocation threatened. Gasping, fighting nausea, I braced for the touch of those pale, elongated hands. Nothing came. Slowly, agonizingly, I pushed myself upright. I was contained within a narrow ravine, steep earth walls ascending on either side. My pursuer was gone. A swift, painful inventory revealed myriad cuts and bruises, a likely sprained wrist, but miraculously no broken bones. My backpack blessedly had cushioned the worst of the fall, battered, bruised, but breathing. As the frantic rhythm of my heart subsided and the adrenaline ebbed, doubt seeped back in. The footprints, the chase, that featureless visage, had my mind, strained by solitude and recent trauma, conjured these horrors. The urge to dismiss it as delusion was potent, yet the memory felt too chillingly real, too viscerally imprinted. Ascending the embankment back into the open woods, back towards potential confrontation, felt unthinkable. The gully, however, slanted downwards. Water seeks lower ground, eventually reaching larger flows, I reasoned. Following its course might offer a path, however indirect, back towards civilization. A fragile plan, but the only one available. I began to walk, each step punctuated by a sharp intake of breath. The gully floor was treacherous, strewn with loose rock, demanding constant vigilance. Hemmed in by the steep sides, shadowed by leaning trees that clawed at the sliver of visible sky, the atmosphere grew increasingly claustrophobic. As I stumbled onward, my mind wrestled with the encounter. A hoaxer in elaborate costume? Some bizarre manifestation of a known animal? Fear-induced phantasm? Each rationalization felt inadequate, flimsy against the stark terror I'd experienced. The alternative, that something inexplicable dwelled in these woods, remained a thought too dreadful to fully entertain. Hours bled away. The gully offered no outlet, no sign of widening into a valley or meeting a river. My water dwindled. The dense energy bars in my pack did little to silence the insistent pangs of hunger. Worse still, auditory phantoms began to plague me. Susurrations carried on the breeze, the phantom crunch of footfalls just beyond sight. Each frantic turn revealed only empty space, yet the oppressive sensation of being watched, hunted, clung to me like the damp forest air. With the dimming of the light, raw panic surged anew. To be caught out here in the encroaching darkness, with that thing potentially moving through it, unbearable. I forced my protesting body into a stumbling trot. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm me, to make me curl into a defeated ball and await my fate, a glimmer appeared, a distinct break in the dense canopy ahead. Hope surged, lending improbable strength to my exhausted limbs. I burst from the gully's confines and found myself teetering on the edge of human settlement. Lamplight spilled from windows. The distant hum of engines reached my ears. Never had the mundane architecture of civilization appeared so profoundly beautiful. Staggering into the small town, I drew startled glances. I knew the image I presented, caked in dirt, streaked with blood, eyes wide with a feral mixture of fear and exhaustion. I found the sheriff's station, collapsing onto a hard plastic chair in the reception area. The deputy who took my report was patient, his skepticism barely veiled by professional courtesy. He logged my fractured narrative, initiated a check for any other overdue hikers, and secured me a room at the town's single motel. That night, beneath the sterile glare of every bulb I could switch on, I tried to erect mental barricades to convince myself the ordeal was concluded. Safety lay within these walls, within the realm of streetlights and locked doors. The entity from the woods, whether nightmare or reality, surely couldn't breach this mundane world. Yet sleep refused its solace. Every closure of my eyes summoned the memory of that smooth blank face, and in the quiet interstices, between the rumble of passing trucks and the drone of the air conditioner, phantom whispers seemed to curl at the edge of hearing. Sleep did not come that night, nor the next. Even back in the familiar landscape of my own life, weeks later, shadows retained a disquieting depth, and the urge to glance over my shoulder became an ingrained reflex, because a chilling certainty had taken root deep within me. You might physically depart the wilderness, but its imprint remains indelible. And somewhere within those vast shadowed forests, something waits, watches, and knows perhaps exactly where to find me should it choose to look again. Silence pressed in, absolute and profound, the first sensation upon waking. Gone was the familiar matins of the wild, the intricate weave of birdsong that usually threaded through the dawn. As Elias unfastened the tent's flysheet, breathing in the chill, mist-laden air, a discordant note resonated deep within him. The world felt askew, tilted off its axis. Wrong. 3 days we'd breathed this untamed air. Elias, his oldest friend Ronan, and Clara, Ronan's partner. A week carved out for disconnection, a pilgrimage into the green heart of nature. But surveying the clearing now, ice traced its way through Elias's veins. Etched deep into the bark of every sentinel tree encircling our haven were glyphs, complex non-Euclidean patterns that pulsed with a faint, internal luminescence against the gray morning. They formed an unbroken cordon, a warding sigil woven around us in the hours we'd slept, utterly absent the night before. Ronan, Elias managed, his voice a strained filament of sound. Ronan, you have to witness this. A rustling answered from within canvas confines, followed by Ronan's sleep-thickened query. What is it, El? Suns barely crack the horizon. Just emerge, please. Moments stretched, then Ronan appeared, scrubbing the sleep from his features. He halted mid-motion, the sight of the glowing carvings leaching the color from his face. Gods above, what is that? Clara joined them then, her gaze wide, darting between the trees and their faces. Was this you two? Her voice held a tremor. Elias shook his head mutely. Impossible. These weren't here when darkness fell. Something, or someone Hachtomi inscribed them while we were oblivious. A heavy quiet descended, freighted with the implications. An unknown presence had moved among them, mere paces from their vulnerable sleep, carving these alien geometries into the forest itself. Unheard, unseen. Ronan, ever the anchor, broke the spell first. All right, no panic. Could be locals, some elaborate joke. Let's break camp, now. Head straight for the trailhead. Elias nodded, latching onto the offered pragmatism. We moved with frantic efficiency, dismantling our temporary home, eyes constantly flicking towards the oppressive tree line. The symbols seemed to observe, their impossible angles inducing a dull ache behind the eyes if stared at too long. The true depth of the horror revealed itself only as they neared completion. Ronan had gone to retrieve the bear bag. their sustenance hoisted high against nocturnal scavengers. He returned empty-handed, his expression spectral. "The line severed," he stated flatly. "Food's gone. All of it." Clara gasped, a small sharp sound. But how? We'd have heard something. A colder dread snaked down Elias's spine. This transcended mere mischief. This was deliberate isolation. "Maybe," Elias offered, fighting to keep his voice steady. "There's a cache marked, an emergency supply depot at a ranger post." Ronan nodded, already unfolding their map. Hope flickered, then sputtered as his expression shifted from concentration to confusion, finally curdling into stark terror. This isn't right." Elias peered over his shoulder. His stomach plummeted. It was their map, yes, but overlaid now, obscuring trails' contours, landmarks, everything, were the same intricate luminous glyphs that hemmed them in. "Okay," Elias breathed, forcing calm. "Deep breath. We know the bearing. East. Head east. We have to hit a road eventually." Shouldering their packs, they struck out, facades of bravery tenuously maintained. But the forest resisted their passage in subtle, unnerving ways. Trees loomed taller, denser than memory allowed. Shadows pooled and writhed with unnatural fluidity. More than once Elias flinched at phantasmal shapes skittering at the periphery of his vision. Hours bled away. By any rational measure, the trailhead should have been reached, yet the woods only deepened, showing no sign of relinquishing their hold. Water dwindled, hunger gnawed with persistent teeth. "We need to halt, regroup," Ronan declared finally, his voice strained taut. They found a small mossy depression and shed their burdens. While Clara carefully apportioned the last drops of water, Elias scaled a towering pine, desperate for perspective. The vista from the canopy crushed his burgeoning hope. An unbroken ocean of trees stretched to every horizon, devoid of any human scar. Worse, far worse, he could discern more symbols carved into distant trunks, forming vast concentric rings around their position. They weren't escaping. They were being funneled, driven deeper into the maze. Relaying this grim intelligence to Ronan and Clara extinguished the final embers of optimism in their eyes. "What could they possibly want?" Clara whispered, her voice fragile, lost. Before an answer could form, a dry twig snapped sharply in the woods behind them. They spun as one, straining to pierce the encroaching twilight. There, hovering just past the edge of the clearing, stood an entity. It was elongated, impossibly slender, limbs jointed at angles that defied anatomy. Its surface, skin seemed too mundane a word, shimmered and flowed like visual static, and etched into its very substance were the ubiquitous glowing glyphs. Thought dissolved into raw flight. Blind terror lent wings to their feet as they plunged back into the arboreal labyrinth. Branches lashed their faces, roots clawed at their ankles. Elias could hear it behind them, a swift rustling pursuit that matched their pace but never closed the distance. Night fell like a smothering shroud, rendering the forest an inkwell barely pricked by their faltering torch beams. They ran until muscles screamed and lungs burned, finally collapsing into a hollow scooped out by the gnarled roots of a colossal, ancient tree. Gasping prone in the damp earth, the enormity crashed down, lost within a landscape actively rewriting itself, pursued by an incomprehensible being, stripped of sustenance, their water nearly gone. The weight of their predicament was a physical blow. "What do we do?" Clara breathed, her hand desperately gripping Ronan's. Elias opened his mouth, but emptiness met him. What platitude could possibly hold purchase against this impossible reality? Assurances would taste like ash. A sound pierced the oppressive dark, a low resonant hum, strangely melodic, emanating from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. The very air around them began to vibrate, to shimmer, and the damnable symbols materialized again, suspended in the space before them like spectral projections. "Oh God," Ronan choked out. "They're here." The humming intensified, building a painful pressure within Elias's skull, as if something sought forceful entry into his mind. He saw Ronan and Clara clutch their temples, faces contorted in agony. Then came the visions. Overwhelming kaleidoscopic flashes, immense cyclopean structures reared against alien skies. Beings of indescribable form moved through dimensions his mind buckled trying to grasp. And woven through it all, the symbols pulsing, shifting, conveying a meaning perpetually just beyond the threshold of understanding. How long they lay there, minds besieged by glimpses of the cosmically monstrous, Elias couldn't fathom. Minutes or eons, the distinction blurred. Then, with merciful suddenness, it ceased. When he could force his eyes open, the forest had vanished. They lay upon cold, seamless stone within a chamber of impossible scale, stretching into shadowed infinities. Walls, floor, ceiling, all were tessellated with the now intimate glyphs, glowing with soft internal light. And they were not alone. Surrounding them stood the entities, dozens, their forms fluid, distorting in ways that inflicted a psychic ache upon the observer. They remained motionless, merely watching with apertures that were not eyes. One detached itself from the silent convocation, its form coalescing into something that brushed against the human template without truly achieving it. When it communicated, the words bloomed directly within Elias's consciousness, bypassing sound. "You have been chosen." The thought resonated. To witness, to comprehend, to become. A scream built in his throat, a primal urge to flee, to shatter this waking nightmare, but his limbs were inert, his body a vessel no longer his own. "Your sphere is but one mote among legions." The entity continued its silent broadcast. "Your perceived reality, a fragile membrane easily rent. We are the custodians, the tenders of the crossings, and you shall be inducted." As the concept settled, Elias felt his own form begin to flux. His skin rippled, flowed like heated wax. New senses flared, limbs budded where none should exist. He tried to cry out, but his mouth was other. The last coherent image before his perception fractured entirely was of Ronan and Clara, writhing beside him, undergoing the same grotesque metamorphosis. Then reality sheared, reformed, and he was seeing, feeling, being, in modalities utterly beyond prior conception. We had wandered into the woods as mortals. We would depart as something far stranger. The custodians had claimed us, and in their claiming scoured away our humanity. In the world relinquished, 3 hikers would simply vanish from the deep woods. Search parties would comb the trails, finding only cryptic sigils burned into ancient trees. And the forest would abide, patient and perpetually hungry, awaiting its next initiates. For we were the custodians now, and the harvest would continue. That shriek slicing through the night. It wasn't human. A raw agony tore from some unseen throat, freezing the marrow in my bones, silencing my pulse for one terrifying beat. I stood paralyzed in Mrs. Gable's parlor, the brass key a cold, trembling weight in my palm. In that instant I knew I'd blundered into a darkness deeper than any shadow cast by the familiar streetlights outside. It began with such mundane kindness. Mrs. Gable, the gentle matriarch next door, whose silver hair and lavender scent seemed woven into the very fabric of our quiet lane, needed a sitter for her home while she visited her daughter upstate. A week, she'd said. Naturally, I agreed. 3 years we'd been neighbors. Her quiet generosity, a plate of warm scones, a watchful eye on my wilting ferns, had forged an easy bond. The first few days unfolded predictably. Morning visits before my commute to tend to Cinder, her sleek black cat. Evening stops to replenish his dish and offer a brief companionship. Mrs. Gable's bungalow, a bastion of floral chintz, polished mahogany, and intricate doilies, felt like stepping into a sepia-tone photograph, comforting in its predictability. The fourth evening fractured everything. Dinner finished, dusk bleeding purple across the manicured lawns, I walked the familiar path to her door. An anomaly snagged my attention. The heavy velvet curtains of the front window were drawn tight. Odd. Mrs. Gable cherished the fading light, always leaving them open until true dark fell. Perhaps Cinder, I reasoned, indulging in some feline redecorating. Unlocking the door, I stepped into the threshold's familiar scent of potpourri and old wood. Cinder. My voice echoed, unnaturally loud in the stillness. Here, kitty. Silence answered. Thick, expectant silence. Usually Cinder would materialize, a sinuous shadow weaving around my ankles, rumbling his demand for affection. Tonight nothing stirred. A cold knot tightened in my gut as I drifted deeper into the house. The parlor lay submerged in gloom. My fingers found the switch, flicking it upward. Light flooded the room, revealing not peace, but violation. Gasped air hitched in my throat. The meticulous order was shattered. Family portraits lay face down, their silver frames askew. Shards of a porcelain vase glittered like frost on the Persian rug, and the armchair upholstered in faded roses bore deep gouged rents, far too savage for Cinder's claws. My heart hammered against my ribs. A break-in. Yet nothing obvious was missing. The television remained. The antique silver service gleamed undisturbed on the sideboard. My phone felt heavy in my hand, fingers already dialing emergency services when a sound arrested the motion. A faint rhythmic scritch-scratch emanating from the basement door. Cinder, I whispered, the name trembling on my lips. That you, boy? The scratching ceased instantly, replaced by a low visceral growl that vibrated up from the floorboards, prickling the hairs along my spine. Definitely not Cinder. Every instinct screamed retreat. Flee. Call for help from the safety of the street. But a morbid cocktail of curiosity and misplaced concern for the cat held me fast. Hesitantly, I crept towards the basement door, the growl intensifying with each step, morphing into a guttural snarl. My hand, slick with sweat, hovered inches from the tarnished brass knob. A shaky breath, then I turned it. The door didn't open. It exploded inward, propelled by an impossible force that sent me reeling. I crashed onto the polished floorboards, the impact jarring stars behind my eyes. Through a swimming haze I registered movement, something vast and ill-defined surging from the Stygian blackness below. It shambled with a grotesque broken rhythm, less human stride, more wounded beast. As my vision sharpened, details coalesced into nightmare. Clotted, matted fur, limbs that bent at sickening, unnatural angles, and eyes, twin embers of sulphurous yellow, gleaming with feral luminescence in the dim parlor light. It resembled nothing earthly, no wolf, no bear, but some terrible misbegotten fusion sculpted from shadow and dread. I scrambled backward, crab-walking frantically across the floor, the frantic drumming in my chest threatening to crack my ribs. The entity advanced, deliberate, unhurried, ropes of saliva glistening from jaws impossibly distended. Those luminous eyes pinned me, burning with a terrifying alien sentience. And then came the scream, that soul-flaying inhuman cry I'd first heard outside, now unleashed at point-blank range. It erupted from the creature, its maw gaping impossibly wide, a sound that felt like it could unspool reality itself. Shock momentarily broke the paralysis. I surged to my feet, propelled by pure adrenaline, running with a speed I hadn't known I possessed. Behind me, the scrape and click of claws on hardwood spurred me onward. The front door seemed miles away. My fingers, clumsy with terror, fumbled at the deadbolt. I felt its heat, a fetid breath ghosting the back of my neck just as the lock yielded. I burst out into the cool night air, tumbling onto the dew-damp lawn. Slamming the door shut, I heard a sickening thud as the creature slammed against the wood from inside. I didn't look back, didn't stop until I reached my own porch, fumbling with my own keys, collapsing against the locked door, breath tearing through my lungs in ragged gasps. My mind fractured, trying to assemble the impossible shards of what I'd witnessed. Such things didn't exist. Not outside fever dreams or the lurid covers of pulp novels. Yet the image, those glowing eyes, the dripping maw, was seared onto my retinas. Trembling violently, I dialed the police, struggling to articulate the horror without sounding utterly unhinged. Their skepticism hummed down the line, but they promised a patrol car. Waiting, heart pounding against the wood of my door, a truly monstrous thought bloomed. Mrs. Gable. What if she returned unexpectedly? What if that thing was still loose in her house? I had to reach her. Her number, thankfully, was stored in my contacts. I dialed, praying. Her familiar, cheerful hello sounded impossibly normal, a lifeline thrown across an abyss. Mrs. Gable, I choked out, my voice splintering. Are you still away? Why, Laura dear, yes. Is everything all right? You sound terribly distressed. A beat of silence stretched, thick with unspoken dread. How could I phrase this? There's something in your house, something awful, dangerous. Please, whatever you do, don't come back yet. The police are coming. Another pause, longer this time. When Mrs. Gable spoke again, the warmth had leached from her voice, leaving it brittle, hollow. Oh dear, she said flatly. You weren't meant to discover him. Ice water sluiced down my spine. Discover who? What do you mean? That creature you encountered, she stated, devoid of emotion. That's my Julian, my son. He had particular needs. I was certain I'd secured the basement properly before leaving. Bile rose in my throat. Your son? Mrs. Gable, that thing, it wasn't human. A dry, rasping sound came down the line, a bitter laugh. No, I suppose he isn't. Not entirely. Not anymore. There was an incident, you understand, many years ago. Julian dabbled, explored things best left untouched. Arcane arts. An experiment went awry, terribly awry. The world tilted. This couldn't be real. But even why keep him locked away? Why not seek help? Help? She scoffed, the sound sharp and broken. What institution caters to this? Containment was the only mercy. I've managed Alara all these years, but I'm not as young as I once was. Which is why I ask you to watch the house. I hoped, perhaps in time, you might understand, might even assist. The implication struck me with physical force. The house sitting, the extended visits to her daughter. A trial run. She'd been subtly evaluating me, grooming me to become the next custodian of her monstrous secret. Before I could form a response, the distant wail of sirens pierced the night. They're here, I stammered. "The police." "No." Mrs. Gable's voice cracked with sudden desperate panic. "You mustn't let them find Julian. Laura, please, you have to keep him safe." I disconnected the call, the phone slipping from my trembling grasp. Flashing blue and red lights strobed across my living room walls. Outside, police cruisers angled towards Mrs. Gable's bungalow, officers emerging cautiously, weapons drawn. A tense quiet descended, broken only by the crackle of police radios. Then, shattering the stillness, came that blood-curdling shriek once more from within the house. Shouts erupted, the sharp retort of gunfire. More screams, inhuman and agonizing. I slid to the floor, hands clamped over my ears, rocking slightly, trying desperately to block out the symphony of violence unfolding next door. How had my placid suburban existence unraveled into this grotesque horror? Eventually, the cacophony subsided into an eerie quiet punctuated by low murmurs and the static hiss of radios. Peeking through the blinds much later, I saw yellow tape cordoning off Mrs. Gable's house like a crime scene in a film. Ambulances waited, their interiors casting sterile white light onto the lawn. Figures moved, carrying stretchers draped in black. A detective, weary and grim-faced, eventually knocked on my door. I recounted everything: the house sitting, the basement discovery, the chilling phone call. He listened intently, his expression hardening, jotting notes sporadically. "You're incredibly lucky," he said finally, his voice rough. "We lost 3 officers in there. Whatever that thing was. It's powerful. Vicious." "Did you stop it?" I whispered, unsure if I wanted the truth. His eyes darkened. "Unclear. Significant blood loss, but no body recovered. It's possible it escaped into the woods bordering the property. We have teams searching." Sleep offered no sanctuary that night, nor for many nights after. Julian. What tormented existence had he endured in that subterranean prison? What manner of mother chooses such a fate for her child, regardless of the transformation? And me? How close had I skirted the edge of that abyss, nearly inheriting Mrs. Gable's terrible burden? The following weeks dissolved into a disorienting haze of official interviews, unwanted media attention, and pervasive sleepless dread. Mrs. Gable was apprehended upon her return, facing a litany of charges. Through it all, she maintained she'd only acted out of maternal protection. Julian was never found. Sometimes when the wind sighs through the trees bordering the neighborhood late at night, I fancy I hear a distant mournful howling. Each time the locks on my doors are checked, double-checked, and the curtains pulled fast against the encroaching dark. I learned a brutal lesson about the secrets festering behind ordinary facades. The quaint house next door, the kindly old woman with her cat and her baking, they concealed a horror beyond reckoning. Now, walking down my own familiar street, I glance at the neighboring houses, at their drawn blinds and silent windows, and wonder what other monsters, human or otherwise, wait patiently behind the veneer of normalcy. One thing is irrevocably certain: I will never house sit again.